All right, welcome back, everyone, to the Cancel for Maintenance podcast. If this is your first time joining us, we are a show that takes a behind-the-scenes look into the gritty, non-glamorous life of aviation maintenance. We share some laughs, impart some wisdom, all in hopes of giving you that split seconds relief in your day that can prevent a mishap. I am your co-host, Six.
I'm MVP.
And our third host, Shoreline, is here again, silently in the back, monitoring our audio, making sure that our faces stay fit for radio. So we've spoken some episodes ago.
Hey, real quick, should we throw out a congratulations to Shoreline?
Yeah, congrats, Mr. Shoreline and Bubbles. Yay!
So for those that don't know, they got hitched over the weekend. So that's big news for them. Very exciting and happy for them. And we wish them all the best for a long and happy life together.
Very much so. Like, we hope they live as long as they want and have all they need for as long as they may live. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So we've spoken some episodes ago about AI, predictive maintenance, the possibility of robot mechanics being part of the mix, greener, better engines, air quotes, greener, better engines, and so forth. Now, all of this sounds great, fantastic. So why don't we see much of this anywhere? And matter of fact, any technological innovation, like, why don't we see so much of it? And it's not like the capability is not there, right? Are there technologies today that could produce better engines, better aircraft, better airliners? Absolutely. 100%. Now, is there a way to make this happen sooner, or is there a way for this to improve the aircraft fuel efficiency from 30 to 15%, help climate change and all that? Maybe not, right? But what's really stopping a lot of these from being in our faces and being in the mix today, it has to do with, like, production and test, for lack of better words, production and test.
Yeah, and anybody who's worked in those environments, how many times have you been on a project for months on end or years on end, trying to flesh out the all the smoke from the wires, I guess, on a piece of equipment, and then all of a sudden it dies in test, right?
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't become incorporated on anything, and I think that's just because at some point, spending so much time in test, I think they say that the juice isn't worth the squeeze.
Right. And so, like, a lot of this, there's a lot of variables that go into this, especially with production and testing. And some of this has to deal with, like, technology maturity and technology reliability, right? And what we mean by this is, especially with technology maturity, is whatever it is you're trying to incorporate, whatever it is, be it tech, a new system, a new practice, a new way of doing things, it has to go through some kind of a vetting phase. And depending on what it is, it may take a while. Like some of the aircraft we see in today's world, like the 737 MAX or the A321neo, or some of the newer fighter planes that the military has or a military has. It looks cool and new now, but those plans and those designs, they probably happened well before they were released, right? Like some in as long as 20 plus years ago, it's been in the soup, just trying to figure out its life. And
well, okay, adding to that, then look at concept cars, right? Every year, auto manufacturers develop new concept cars, some futuristic design, some far out there features or crazy amounts of power, handling capabilities, whatever. We've all seen those pictures of those cars. And at best, for many of them, there's one prototype out there and it can barely operate under its own power. In many cases, it can't. It's just a shell, with wheels. So it's one of those things, right? The design's there, but maybe technology isn't to the point of making it.
Right. Or like you were saying with concept cars, like look at the electric car, right? The first ever electric car was developed in 1901, but the first commercially sold electric car I think it was, I want to say it was Tesla. God help me if it was not Tesla, but let's just say it was Tesla. It was 2003 when that first came out. Like, picture that time span, 1901 to 2003. That's like almost a whole turn of the century since it was first developed, like in concept to when it's commercially sold. A car of all things. So imagine an airplane, right? Now, granted, with an airplane, it's seen a tremendous progression in technology, right? So from canvas covered wings to shit damn near like non-metallic 100%, 80% carbon fiber wings and stuff like that, right? But having that technological or technical maturity, for instance, it's the reason behind this is we want to ensure that all its internal flaws or design flaws have either been accounted for, reduced, or eliminated, right? Especially when you're talking in terms of carrying people, like an airplane. We want to make sure that we've accounted for every possible gripe, right?
So that's why you test it in different settings, right? You don't just put it in the test cell in a controlled environment and flip on the switch and it works or mostly works. You go, wow, we hit this, we hit the nail on the head right out the gate. And it's like, well, test it at negative 60 degrees or 70 degrees. Why would we do that? That's kind of the temperatures at altitude it might be operating at, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to be in an environmentally controlled bay? No. Okay, we tested at that. Oh, it failed on us, or swing the other way with temperatures and extreme heat. Oh my gosh, it overheated and fried itself. Okay, well your concept isn't vetted yet,
right? And some of this stuff, like what MVP said, like in this controlled environment, you'll get a lot of individuals with very bright and innovative ideas. Case example is our engineers. It sounds extremely awesome on paper. It sounds freaking great in the CAD system or is it CADs?
CADs are some of the design systems.
Yeah, it's like
design programs.
I was having a brain fart right now, but it looks freaking awesome in your design software. But once you actually turn it into material stuff, then like reality sets in, right? Oh, this material would be freaking great if it was made out of titanium, because titanium doesn't flex a certain way, or it's durable to certain degrees, or whatever the case. Sounds cool until you have to like build a plane out of it, which if anyone's ever worked with titanium, it sucks. Like, it doesn't agree with you. It doesn't mold the way you want it to. It doesn't bend the way you want it to.
And also, it's not cost. You want to get to the main reason of it. It's not cost efficient to build a whole aircraft out of titanium.
Yeah.
You go, okay, we're going to build fuselage, wings, everything out of titanium. All right, customer, your plane, which was originally $40 million, is now $350 million. Well, that's quite the price hike. Yeah, but it's all titanium. Yeah, so no. So we build some critical parts that we need to out of it, and the rest is all aluminum and or carbon fiber in today's world.
Yep. And for lack of better reasons, it's because it's cheap. It performs almost the exact same way.
Another critical aspect: cost, but also the weight.
Yes.
I mean, titanium's light, but carbon fiber's lighter.
Yeah. And for the intent that you're trying to go with, it does nearly the exact same thing, but it's cheaper, right? That's why a majority of the 787 is made out of composite material. What do they call it? The plastic princess. Some people have mentioned. I think Stig has actually called it that, the plastic princess, because it's mostly just composite. Not hardly any of it's metal. Now, that's great if you want to save weight, especially for an aircraft of that size, right? But going back to like what we're saying about the technology piece, right? Like, there's a reason why these things take a while, because you have to account for these flaws or whatever the design is in different scenarios. Controlled, obviously, that's going to be step one. And then two is like you start to stress test it. You start finding out what its maximum limits are and whatever the case may be. And this is not just like the latest material. This also comes down to software, which if anyone's ever dealt with software, one little digit out of place can send the whole equation out of whack.
Oh, and weeks of testing wasted for one strand of code that was, one number off or one variable off.
Right. And then some of them, they're easy to fix. Like they're just patches, right? Like you got to fill the code with some extra code or something like that. Others, it takes an entire whole software revision. Like we have to take this back to formula or back to code and then redo the entire script and then try that out again. And sometimes these turnaround take forever. Like, I'm not sure if anyone's ever tried having to do a glass mod on a non-glass aircraft, meaning like it went from gauges and tubes and
went from analog to digital.
Yeah. Like, if you guys have ever done that kind of mod, it sucks, right?
I've done it one time and it was a nightmare. It was a wiring nightmare.
Yeah. And it's not a fun time. And then that's assuming that the technology is going to be accepted by the new plane or by the old plane. It's kind of like getting donor organs. It's like there's a 50-50 chance it'll work or it's going to slightly work, but then you got to constantly keep feeding it like some kind of anti-rejection pills to make sure that it stays working. And that's kind of the issue we're having now with some of these aircraft. As they mature, as they get older, you start sticking new parts in it, right? It's going to work, but there's a high chance, like, it's you stitched a wounded pig too many times. If that's a terrible analogy, I'm sorry.
It's like assimilating bionics with the human neurological system. Is it possible? It is, but not as easy as plug and play as you would hope.
Yeah. And then as you're testing these, right, like a lot of these data points that you've incorporated, if it's brand new, never been done before, you kind of have to just guess of where you want to have these stopping points, right? There's a set framework in certain places, sure, but if it's brand new, novel, never been done before, you kind of have to just kind of feel for it, right? Or at least have like a general plan and then adjust as necessary. Like we're going to do a check before first ground turn. Okay, that we've encountered these many problems. Maybe we should do some checks before that. It's so forth and so forth. So that's kind of where your predictive trends kind of come in from previous builds, assuming that they still exist. That's another problem too. So this is kind of getting into the weeds of like what production and testers do. And for the most part, most aircraft mechanics on the field maybe won't see this, right? But it also kind of answers the question of like, okay, we've been promised this greener, better, more efficient engine for some time now, or we've been promised supersonic commercial flights for some time now. Why isn't this happening? Here's your reason. The first one and all is we got to make sure that whatever we put into this thing, it's not going to just blow up or it's not going to destroy itself.
Oh, yeah. I'm talking hundreds, if not thousands of hours of these parts ran inside of a test cell at all types of conditions and powers ratings, right? And measurements taken every 10 minutes to see efficiency ratings and then part degradation. We lose, okay, we're this efficient, but over the course of 100 flight hours, at whatever RPM levels, our efficiency degrades back to what normal engines are. So, okay, right now, the technology says we can be more efficient, but not long term. So how do you have to make it long-term sustainable efficiency to get customers to buy into it? Because the customer's going to go, you want me to spend almost double for this high efficient engine in the hopes that I'll make my money back on the cost of fuel. However, if it's going to lose its efficiency in 100 hours, again, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. I'm not going to spend the money to be right back where I started.
Right. And then you brought up a good point too, is like the long term of these. Like, is this technology going to survive for the time that we're expecting, right? Example is like, say, the SR-71. When it first came out, fucking great, fantastic plane. It did what it's supposed to do, and then it became obsolete, right? So
yeah. Well, and then on the contrary, let's look at the B-52. Came out sometime, 1950, 51 time frame. And it's currently going through, they're putting new engines on it and different upgrades and glass cockpits. That's nearly a century old, it's in another decade or two, a century old weapon system, nearly unheard of. And that's what happens when you have a good life cycle sustainment program for a platform. It keeps its value a little bit longer, right? It's proven multi-mission capable for different missions, I guess to say, I'm trying not to give away some words that might get me in trouble, so I apologize, everybody, if it seems like I'm stuttering over my words.
Yeah,
trying not to condemn myself by the feds. but so with that, it had multiple uses in different scenarios, whereas the SR-71 was kind of a one-trick pony.
Mm-hmm.
Fast, and it did what it needed to do, and it ended up in museums and boneyards.
Yeah.
Except for one. There's still one unaccounted for.
Is there?
Yeah. Yep. And, it's doing what it needs to do.
Yeah. So, again, like we're not just, if we're going to waste time making something, we're not going to just have it just survive for only 3+ years or maybe just 5 to 10. We kind of want this to, if we're going to invest in this, we want it to kind of be prepared to make the long haul, right? Example, again, other than the SR-71 or the B-52 is like the 737. This thing's still in service. God knows, right? Like many mechanics out there can attest just how some of these parts are harder to come by. They're starting to show their age, and then they're starting to refresh it with the 737 Max or Airbus's case, the A320neo. Right, same plane, same concept, just newer stuff. Right, and the good part about today's world is we're getting a lot faster with prototyping, especially with 3D printing being a thing. It's a lot easier to kind of get like a scale replica of what we're trying to do, or sometimes even go as far as making a whole functioning unit, maybe just at a certain size, or depending on what it is, it can actually be full size. But that's just the way things are going. So this new wave of prototyping things helps with that test phase of figuring out what the internal flaws are. Granted, what material you're using it can kind of play a factor, especially if we're doing 3D printing or some kind of additive manufacturing to test it or prototype it. But you can get a general ballpark idea of how far you're going. Like there's some whiz kid math that goes into it. Like, okay, it's this big, made out of this material, but if it's made out of this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know the full math, but that's part of it. Also, like with these different research technologies that come around, like they have to, besides having longevity and having a certain application of what they're for, they also have to kind of meet the requirements of today and kind of sort of predict what's going on for the future. What I mean by that is like, say, right now, carbon emissions is a big thing. We want greener, better engines, for example. So they have to kind of fit themselves in the box, assuming that greener, better engines means, 50% less carbon emissions. And then they kind of have to sort of predict themselves for the future. It's like, well, is it going to stay 50%? Is it going to go less than 50 or higher than 50? Who the heck knows?
Or are we going to choke out the motors by whatever emissions designs we're inputting? Think of your diesel pickup trucks, right? They have all these cats and restrictor plates and things like that on them, and diesels, right, should be able to run for hundreds of thousands of miles just with regular maintenance, and they're choking themselves out at 150,000 miles, 200,000 miles.
Yeah.
When before that when unrestricted, that engine can go 500 plus. So, there's lots to consider like that. And also, right. So, okay. The flavor of the week now is reduced emissions. Great. But what's the next? What's the next trend in the industry? Well, Six said it earlier. Supersonic flights, right? We're back to the days of the Concorde. Okay, cool. We got a plan for the future. So how can we be reduce carbon emissions and also go supersonic in speed? Well, we need more fuel to do that and more power, but that more emissions. So continual testing, modification, design, all those kind of things, right? So and then we've all heard the hydrogen engines, right? That's based off of water, right, and producing power. And some companies out there are making pretty decent strides in it, but then again, okay, all right, hydrogen. Ooh, no more fossil fuels, no more dinosaur oil. But then there comes the turn. Well, where are you getting all your water from?
Mm-hmm.
It's you burning salt water, protect the oceans. You burning fresh water. Hey, what am I going to drink?
Yeah,
there's caveats to everything, right? You just got to do the best you can with the information you have at the time.
Right. Exactly. Right. And then this is kind of going into the business part, and MVP already mentioned it. We got to kind of consider the entire cost of it, right? Like if we go with this initiative or we go with this technology, how much is it going to run, right? Because with any kind of technology or any kind of startup, there's always some kind of kick-up cost or kick-off cost. And it's depending on what that is, it can be something along the lines of hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions, or in some cases, like especially with higher end, more sophisticated stuff, is going to run towards the billions.
Right. So, and I don't know if a lot of people know this. Sorry to cut you off, but I don't know if a lot of people know this. A lot of most R&D comes out of the company's pockets, unless they're approached by a government entity or some other big investor or whatever else. If they're out there, let's say Pratt and Whitney are testing motors, and they're trying to get to the break into that next realm of whatever that is for their industry. Let's say hydrogen motors. A lot of that R&D is going to be out of their own pocket. So you got to think companies got to save somewhere to have the capital to research, to break into that next phase, to generate more business, to keep the business going. And so the cycle repeats itself until the end of time.
That's a very good point you mentioned there. And that's another reason why a lot of this technology gets kind of delayed, is because we have great ideas, we have the initiative, we have the technology to do it. We just don't have the money. If we kind of come to a stopping point, like, okay, this is starting to run past our designed budget or our designated budget, and it starts bleeding into our capital, or this starts bleeding into other programs that rely on these funds, then I'm sorry, like on a maybe question mark versus something that's already tested and proven or is already working, we're going to go with tried and true versus, hey, let's fuck around and find out. That's just the sad reality of it. And I think that's kind of the thing for us as mechanics too. Like, we like the idea of change, but we're not just going to go with any pony that just shows up to the race. We kind of want one that has a history to it. We want something that has like some kind of proven record that it's going to work, versus just like, hey, let's just roll the dice and see what happens, guys. I'm like,
yeah, that's why you see proof of concept stuff. Jeez, I'm hitting puberty again. Let's use some of what Scale Composites has done most of his career. Really good at building one-off airframes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And say, hey, I got this idea, put it on paper. Okay, let's make something out of it. Let's test fly it. And you go, hey, customers, we've got this design. It's capable of this. We've flown it 5 times, anybody interested? And then if they get some interested customers, then those customers go on. They hold $100 bill in front of them, hand them $100 bill and say, okay, what else can it do? And then that's how those kind of things go. Yeah. Right. So oftentimes you got to do it out of pocket enough to show the idea can actually, rubber can meet the road. a little bit, and then the customer says, "Yep, that's interesting, pretty interesting. I need it to do some additional tricks, though. Can you make that happen?" "Sure can, but we're going to need a little funding here to make that happen for you." Mm-hmm. "Okay, you show us what you can do. You can meet our demands, and let's talk production."
Yeah. And another thing to consider too is the safety around it. Depending on what region or what nation you are, those safety regulations can be a little loose, or it can be really strict. An example of really loose versus really strict is, for instance, our EASA folks over in Europe. EASA has a very strict testing requirement and very strict flying requirements and shit. Like even with the mechanics, they have to have like so many years of experience just to be licensed, and then they have to take X amount more to get the same amount of work done versus other places.
Yeah, wasn't it like 16 years almost to be considered a fully qualified mechanic? Like, yeah, that's like doctorate levels. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, then
again, that's why they get to be called engineers instead of mechanics,
right? Yeah. And then even at that, like they could only hold like 5 certifications for type rated aircraft. Was it 5 or
3 or 5 somewhere in there?
Yeah. So that's insane. Like other places, like say for the US, like shit, you're licensed. If you're certified, yeah, do it. If you can be certified in everything from canvas planes to helicopters, for all we give a shit.
Do you have a license? Yes. Have tools? Yes. Can work? Yes. Get to work.
Got you, fuck. Willing to travel? Nope. Well, maybe. Well, let's just turn that into a yes, and then you're hired. Cool. Roll it.
No, I don't think travel is going to work for me. I'm just going to mark you down as yes. Welcome aboard.
Right, but again with the safety thing, right? So we mentioned EASA is pretty strict. Most other places they're fairly strict with it, but we're just saying EASA because they're like extremely strict. But whatever region you're at, those safety regulations can be a big holding point or a choke point for whatever technology you're trying to do. Like example with like the supersonic flight, we've covered this in a previous episode. Until some safety regulations let up, there's no supersonic flight that's going to happen in populated areas, period. Right? So how do you test a supersonic plane commercially when you can't fly over commercial areas? Question mark. Right?
Right. Yeah. So then that's where you need that customer approval. And then they say, hey, we've got a couple of lanes here you can go that fast in. Here's a temporary pass for you to come in and try it out, because we want you to. Yeah.
And another big one to consider is like the availability and the reliability of the data you're getting from all these different tests. So in some cases, these data points will come immediately, right off the bat. Okay, bam, 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 we got a trend. In some cases, like you need to track these trends over time, so it takes a lot longer. And some of these can be like once every 3 months, once every 6, or we're going to try to push this thing to its absolute limit, but that requires you having to monitor it for X amount of months or years. Examples like life cycle. We can kind of sort of predict a life cycle, but we kind of want to ride it to the dirt just to see exactly how far we can push this thing. Because if we just kind of give a general ballpark, like, okay, it's made out of this material, it should last this long. There's that keyword should, because we've seen some that says like, this has like a 10,000 flight hour life cycle and it shits itself at 200. So those availability of information to assess what it's doing, it can be fast or it can be slow, and that can be a major choke point itself. And those data points are expensive too. So it's sad that all of this goes around the money, but that's more or less like another choking point in that regard. So
yeah, I'm almost going to say that's probably the largest choking point. If money wasn't a factor, I mean, we'd be visiting other planets in the solar system. We'd already be at Warhammer 40K. Right. We'd be fighting galactic wars in the name of the God Emperor. You know what I'm saying?
Right. We'll be traveling through the warp and everything. Or we might actually have a webway instead of just having to descend through the dimension of hell to get to places. That's right. So, and also like a good way to assess like that, your technology is ready or it's ready for implementation, is your abilities is tried and tested. Like we can predict with a 95% degree of confidence that this is going to work exactly as planned, and we have these predictable fixes should something go wrong, for the most part, right? Because things degrade over time, but at least for this period, we can tell you this is what's going to happen. Like how versatile it is, like air quote nimble. Like, can it do what it wants? Can it add more on? Can it take some off? What can we do to deviate should we have to? Like the ability to sustain itself, right? That sustainability is probably like one of the bigger things. I think that kind of determines the life cycle of any kind of technology. It's like, how sustainable is this? An example was, again, with the SR-71, fantastic plane, right? And had it not been for satellites, it probably would still be flying all over the place. But what also would have been a big problem for this is the fact that it guzzles fuel like it's fucking cool. So the amount of fuel it would take to keep that thing in the air, plus only certain type of planes can carry the fuel that it needs, and so forth and so forth. Shit gets expensive. So
yeah, imagine having to drive in your drive to work, and you have to fill up on the drive there, and by the time you get to work, you have to fill up again.
Yeah,
like that kind of fuel consumption.
Yeah, that's terrible, right? So again,
never mind that when you fuel it, it's constantly just draining. And when I say not dripping fuel, draining fuel out of it, because the tolerances and everything were so loose because of the speeds it would go to, it would just piss fuel all over the ground. And so as soon as it got in the air, it had to hit a tanker immediately.
Yeah.
And then once it got up to speed and temperatures and all this and everything stretched out, all the joints would tighten up and it would stop leaking. But that was how it had to be designed, because otherwise, if you made it tight fittings in a cold environment, once it would stretch up, once it hit temperatures, everything would break apart.
Isn't that wild though, man? Like, I want to say, like, once it's at full speed, or at the minimum cruise speed, the heat expansion is about like 4 to 6 inches all around.
It stretches. Yep.
I think that's freaking crazy. Like, imagine that, man. Like, the heat expansion is so great, it expands like almost like half a foot.
Yeah. Actually, I want to know who worked on the X-Men's SR-71. Maybe that's the one that's still missing.
Right.
Who worked on that one?
Yeah. It's somewhere in a school parking lot, you know what I mean? Like underground and shit.
Yeah, but which children did they have work on that? And is it child labor laws at that point, or because they're air quotes mutants, it's okay?
Yeah, right. It's like, we're getting into some xenophobic shit, right? Like spare not the heretic, or suffer not the heretic.
Suffer not the heretic.
Yep. Oh man. But for us as line mechs, a lot of these technologies, it sounds great. It's fantastic. Don't get us wrong. And some of these we would more than love to see it happen. Like greener engines, fantastic. Or safer engines, freaking great. All for it, right? But again, with anything that's new, it takes time. And in some cases we kind of forget about it until it shows up again. Like
yeah, I mean, a lot of stuff's got to be shelved for a while until either funding catches up or a new need arises for that technology. Yeah. You know, I mean, look at a lot of what we know as, a lot of what the majority of the populace knows as new technology has actually been out for 15 to 20 years already. And there's already new stuff that superseded it, but it's still in its testing phases.
Yeah. Like a good example of this is the Osprey, the MV-22, I believe it's called. Like, that aircraft was initially designed, went into concept, freaking full brain engineering in the 80s, like 1983, I want to say. And
I thought it was before that.
And it didn't come into effect. Like, it didn't get built and tested and all that until like about 2006. Right? So like almost like a full.
Was it that soon? Yeah. We had already been in Afghanistan, Iraq for a few years when that thing came online.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Wow. So like I want to say it was like early 2000, like 2001, 2002 when they said, okay, we're going to build a brand new Osprey. We're going to build this plane. It's called an Osprey. They like showcased like an example of what they wanted to do. It's kind of a 3D model of what they wanted to do. And then the first one rolled off the lot around 2006, 2007 is when it rolled off the lot. But the design of this, the whole brainchild of this thing came from the 80s. I'm like, Jesus Christ, man. So picture that, right? Like something that was in the mix for almost 30 years. Actually, it was like 20 something years at that point. But 20 something years it took from the time they first came up with the idea to the time it was actually put on the field. So again, with like these newer technologies, I mean, as innovations come through, right, it gets everyone excited, like, oh, cool, right? But until like there's an actual need or a use for this, it's just going to sit on the shelf until someone's ready to fork the money for it. Or like as MVP said, like the idea is great, the benefits are great, the efficiency is great, but we just don't have the money to do it. And some of these things can cost in the billions.
And there's few people out there who can afford to do it on their own. SpaceX and Elon Musk, he's one of the few that can go, yeah, I don't need your money, thanks. I'll just do it myself.
Yeah.
And he's they've designed the brilliant minds over there. They've designed repeatable takeoff and landing rockets, up and down. And, and you say, okay, well, that's fantastic. But his big goal was Mars. How come he hasn't made it to Mars yet? Well, and the reality of it is we can get stuff there, but we can't get people there yet. The journey's too long. And, I don't think we have maybe the cryostasis abilities to, you would need multi-generational crews on board to be able to make the journey, unless you use cryostasis. And you say, well, I don't think that technology is yet there either. Unless you believe the conspiracies around Disney had developed that a long time ago, and Walt Disney's in cryostasis and everything else. I mean, they say the moon landing didn't happen, and that was all filmed in Disney film sets. That's why there's a limited number of footage, because it was so advanced for the time. Sorry, everybody. A little conspiracy there for you. Something to contemplate over your family dinner.
Right. but again, like you were saying, especially with SpaceX, like you got individuals that have that kind of money to blow, and love or hate what SpaceX does. I mean, they're progressing extremely fast for the amount of things that they're trying to do, like especially with the touch and go rockets. Yeah, have their missions been successful? Kind of, sort of. But again, like I think like some places they take failure as a learning curve. So like, well, and that kind of goes into the safety bit, right? Like, how safe do we want it to be before it leaves the deck? There can be some red tape behind that. There can be some government oversight behind that, right? Depending on where you are, obviously. But in the case of SpaceX, I mean, they crash as much as they send up. But in the times they crash, they know what works and what didn't, and they're learning this real time. And the good part is like there's not people on board to do this, so. At least I don't think there's people on board, but those failures actually count for success. And in terms of aircraft, that kind of sort of runs the same way. Like when we develop new engines, we stick this in a cell and we max the crap out of this, and then go 20% more to see just how maxed we can really get before this thing blows itself up. And that's how we know, like, okay, do not exceed this fast. Ever. Or if you go this fast, it will auto excel on its own and then grenade itself. Stuff like that. And
once you get a certain RPM range, if it goes beyond that, there's no stopping it until it centripetal force turns it into a giant frag grenade at 150,000 RPMs or whatever.
Yeah. And then as long as this is the innovation and the technology, this works out for us as mechs, because like we at least have some kind of comfort knowing that this thing has gone through some form of rigmarole before it gets in our hands commercially, or at least for full use. So there's like some data behind it. Like there's trends, there's manuals, there's stuff about it. And sadly, some of that stuff is probably proven by mistakes, right? Like we wrote this with our own mistakes. And in the same sense, it's kind of good because now we know like this is the do not pass go line. And that's part of the reasons why like a lot of stuff does take forever, because we don't know what these lines are and we're trying to figure it out. And we can kind of guesstimate and ballpark it, but we won't know for sure until we get there, kind of thing. And it's better we get there in a controlled environment versus like figuring this out as it's on the line with people in it or people putting hands on it. And yeah, we've seen some incidences where that kind of stuff has happened, and not fun. Oh man. Anything else about the progressive technology and why it's not here today, MVP?
Well, in my own personal opinion, it's limited by money, funding. If you had, unlimited resources to, money resources or financial resources to pay the hours, to pay the time, to pay for higher grade materials, and bigger test labs where you can there's only a few test labs around the United States anyway where you can do full airframe temperature testings, right? Extreme colds, extreme heats, basically like it was flying in the ocean, soaking it with water, all these kind of things. So if each company had their own environment where they could throw anything in there at any time they wanted, I think I think we'd be already living in the Warhammer 40K universe.
Oh yeah, I'm all about that.
But also in my own opinion, if you said, well, MVP, what would you like the industry to focus on for technology? I want my R2D2 robot mechanic helper is what I want.
Yeah, right.
Give me that.
Yeah.
I want it.
Give me the freaking robot mechanic droid, damn it. If there's anything we want, I want the droid. Please.
Please, give me the droid. And I need something where I can understand his beeps and boops into language. And then when I speak in my language, he understands, or they understand, or it understands.
Right. Would that technically be an extra worker, or would that be considered a tool?
Well, I think it depends on if your robot helper kind of upsets you that day. It's like, oh, hey, if you're working well together, yeah, man, my partner and we work great together. But if it gets a AI self-developed attitude, kind of like the real R2D2, you could call it a tool.
It starts learning how to be a freaking asshole, knowing mechanics. That's exactly what will happen. Like, the fuck's up with these damn droids? Like, oh, they're mechanic droids. Like, oh, got it.
Oh yeah, they're also laced with sarcasm and hate.
They learn sarcasm and hate because of us. Do not let these embed with the mechanics. Like, let them work with them, but as soon as they're done, turn them off, take them outside, because they will learn how to be just like them.
When they plug in at the end of the day, it's like they get a whole memory wipe and reboot with the new software again. So every day is like starting fresh, like 51st dates, but for droids.
They gotta relearn it, how to be your partner again every single day.
To relearn who you are and know that you're not and thinks that you're not an asshole. And by the end of every shift, you're already back to fighting at each other and cursing and beeps and boops at one another.
I love it. Please make this happen. Please make this happen. I'm all for it. And then, aside from the money choke point and whatnot, again, it's all down to, well, besides money and resources, it's also the safety regulations and the intent of what we're trying to fulfill. Because a lot of stuff has great ideas, but so it's one of those, like, when you sit with it, it really doesn't answer much, right? Like, you get a fantastic idea and you're like, it just sounded cool, but it doesn't really have any kind of application. But hey, let us know what you guys think. Like, how do you think technology is going to progress faster than it needs to be? Do you think it's not progressing fast enough? How soon do you think we're going to see something new? And should we?
Yeah. What do you think the next phase of the industry is?
Yeah.
From my perspective, it's hypersonics, right? And space. So, for a long time it was okay, let's extend, long distance. Let's extend the range of these, and how long can we fly and how many people can we take? And then it turned into the stealthy unmanned. Well, it turned into unmanned, and then that progressed into the stealth and a multitude of platforms. And and now it's like, well, let's go fast. Let's go fast again. Let's go SR-71, but on cocaine. Yeah. And then some manufacturers are looking at that, but I think as a whole, my assumption is fast in space.
Yep.
Controlling, okay, you can say this is going to be a grim outlook on it, people, but with the way the world is and how humans are by nature, I just foresee it. And I think it's going to be, okay, whoever can control the atmosphere controls the world.
Yeah.
So you can say, well, we disagree with you and we're going to nuke you. That's cool. I got a laser or overhead right now that'll glass your entire country if you want to play games. If you want to play the French around and find out,
Yeah. I think also too that's gonna lean along the lines of smarter. Like we're kind of seeing it now with airplanes where it can tell us what's wrong with itself. So it might even get so smart where like it starts like figure out how to fix itself. You know what I mean? Maybe not entirely fix itself, but it will start like die. It can almost have like some kind of, I don't know, like self-repair system before it actually have to have a mechanic or an engineer.
Let's use the what was it, Star Wars, the clone? No, oh my gosh. Boy, there's going to be a lot of fans out there that are going to want to string me up for this one. Was it the Clone Wars or the Attack of the... Oh, the one with the droids in there. There's Padme and all them when they meet them, they go to Tatooine for the first time.
Yeah.
Anyways, what was the name of that one?
Oh, the pit droids you're talking about? Like the ones where like little mechanic droids that fix each other?
Well, yeah, there's those, but I was thinking on that movie when they're taking the queen and the princess, off planet, and they're trying to hide, and their shield generator gets damaged by the Empire and the blockade. The 3 R2-D2s go onto the surface of the ship as it's flying, and they're fixing it. 2 of them get taken out. R2-D2's the actual one who fixes it and makes it back inside.
Yeah.
So something along those lines, right? And so I gave you my grim outlook on the future, but here's what I like to tell myself before I go to bed. Would be something along the lines with Sixhead, which is the long-term space travel. We humans get into a cryostasis chamber on board, and we have AI C-3POs and R2-D2s running the ship and everything for the millennia that it takes to get to wherever we want to go, and then wake us up when we get close. Think of the David AI character in the movie Prometheus.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Now David all sort of ultimately turned bad, right? But let's keep the happy spin on that, and that's kind of where I think we're going to go. Is we're going to start expanding into the stars a little bit, which would be cool because it'd be we've heard astronomers and others talk about what's that planet Titan something out there, which they say is a larger, almost model of Earth, sort of like the planet in Avatar.
Oh yeah. It's slipping my head right now, but I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, that'd be a freaking good outlook.
But they say for us to get there, that would take, oh my gosh, what was the last number I heard? It was like it was 300 to 500 years, somewhere in that realm.
Jesus.
Right. So think about, humans would have to procreate on board for generations to be able for humans to get there in time, unless you can cryostasis us for centuries and have AI overlook us and everything else, and then we wake up upon arrival. But that'd be pretty cool to actually see what else is out there in the universe, although we might not like what we find either.
This is very true. We find the freaking Tyranid horde and shit. Oh my god, we fucked up.
Oh, no. Go back.
Biomass, no. But again, let us know what you all think, right? Like what's coming up, what's coming new. Should we have some of these things, and what do you think is the next step? Hey, let us know in the comments. Let us know in our social medias, our website, our email, whichever way is easiest for you. The absolute best way to get in touch with us is Discord via our Patreon. We have all sorts of conversations like this, the what ifs, the will do's, some other things that can help us all connect the dots and become better mechanics. But hey, we thank you all again for listening, and we'll catch you all on the next one. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
We would like to take this time to thank our patrons for supporting our show and allowing us to make episodes, maintain our gear, and create merch for all of our listeners. With special thanks to Erica Lamont, Chris Hawkins, Eric Shaw, Dan Schubert, Ryan Frushauer, Kyle Keir, Mike Sherwood, Caleb Stockhill, and Jennifer Brofer. Thank you all so much for your support and patronage. If you like our show, please support us on Patreon. You'll receive awesome perks like access to our private Discord, discounts and early access to our merch, first glimpse of our comics and other projects, and so much more. You can further support us and show off your prowess as an aircraft specialist by visiting our shop at cancelformaintenance.com. If you like classy or rugged watches, visit our affiliate Rockwell Time at rockwelltime.com. Use the code CX, the number 4MX to save 10% off your total order. If you have suggestions for the show or you'd like to be a guest on the show, send us a line on our contact us section at cancelformaintenance.com, and we'll do what we can to get both your ideas and yourself on the show. Please support us on social media like Facebook at Cancel for Maintenance, Instagram at CANX for Maintenance Podcast, or Twitter at CXMX Podcast. Please check out our new comic series on the Tapas app. Like, share, subscribe, and comment on our comics. Let us know what you think. Thank you all so much for your support and listenership, and we will catch you all next time.